Now, after years of rampant hyperinflation and banknotes so big that the zeros can't be counted, Zimbabwe is finally completing the withdrawal of its own currency, the Zimbabwean dollar. The central bank says the number that's now behind me, that is 35 quadrillion Zimbabwean dollars, will, in theory now, buy you just one US dollar. The US greenback and the South African rand are the two dominant foreign currencies that are now considered legal tender inside Zimbabwe. To get a sense of just how bad Zimbabwe's problems with its own currency became, let's have a look back at what happened when our Africa correspondent Andrew Harding went shopping in a Harare supermarket in 2008.
As for what they are selling here, we'll just check out these prices. They are quite surreal. 61 billion Zimbabwe dollars for a kilo of tomatoes. This is what you get when you have hyperinflation running at maybe 15 million%, one of the highest in recorded history.
So that was the only time in his life that Andrew Harding was a billionaire, back in 2008. Let's now get the thoughts of Philip Haslam, the author of the book When Money Destroys Nations, which is a look at Zimbabwe's currency problems. He joins us now from Johannesburg. You know this story very well, 2008 when it all came to a head, but now, you know, the final chapter is being written on the collapse of the Zimbabwean currency. In a nutshell, what on earth went wrong?
Good afternoon, Stephen. Good afternoon to your viewers. The problems in Zimbabwe related to money printing. In 1997, the Zimbabwe government started printing money in response to its debts. And it took the country, the economy, on a slow spiral towards hyperinflation. It took a while. It took 11 years. The last 3 years was characterized by significant rising prices and hyperinflation that we know and have studied around the world. And so that was a characteristic of Zimbabwe's crisis, and that ended at the end of 2008. And in the beginning of 2009, the government legalized alternative currencies such as the US dollar and the South African rand.
And Philip, we'll get to that in a sec, but just tell me, what is the difference between a country that has an inflation problem, maybe it's running at 30 or even 50% a year and the politicians are getting a lot of flack from the public, what's the difference between that and a country which completely loses control of inflation? What's the trigger that turns an inflation problem into an inflation total catastrophe?
A great question, and the real difference is timing. You know, people will look at a country at a moment in time, but the reality is that money printing takes a while to work its way into an economy. And as a government begins to print more and more money, that inflation rate begins to rise over time. And it takes a while for that to occur. I mean, we've seen in Venezuela at the moment, you know, inflation rates are rising and governments are responding with further money printing. And we can only say that that money printing will cause future inflation rates to exceed much higher rates.
Well,
certainly that was the case in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, that's right. And what we see today, I mean, I was just in Zimbabwe and I went around the markets in Harare, and of course everybody is using US dollars. You know, I got traders to open their wallets for me and they flicked through the dollar bills. They certainly didn't have any Zimbabwean dollars. They did have some South African rand. But here's the thing. In Zimbabwe today, they have no control over their own currency. They're using somebody else's currency. And how long is that sustainable?
It's a major problem in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the only country in the world that is almost totally a cash-based society. As in, people at the stores will trade in cash. They will bring cash, they will receive cash, and those notes are not typically washed as happens in other countries around the world, where a bank will receive dirty old notes and destroy it and reissue new currency. The notes in Zim are perishing, and they've been traded tens of thousands of times. And it's a major problem.
So let me stop you for a sec. I mean, just practical stuff. How do they get, you know, where do they get their new dollars from? And what if they ran out of dollars?
Yeah, it's a real dilemma for the for local Zimbabweans, and they typically actually have to import boxes of US dollar notes, and they do that through trading, and they do have some links through their banking system, but it's very much a hands-on US dollar based system.
All right. Well, Philip, it is a fascinating story, and I suppose most people around the world fervently hope they don't go down the same road as Zimbabwe when it comes to currency. But thank you very much for joining us from South Africa.